Shellfire echoed on Saturday around the near-deserted streets of the Ukrainian town of Bakhmut, current focus of the most intense fighting in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, despite Moscow's declaration of a ceasefire for Eastern Orthodox Christmas. Sparkling clear skies and a dusting of snow belied the devastation of a city abandoned by most of its pre-war population of 70,000, where humanitarian volunteers now risk their lives to support those who stayed. Moscow said on Saturday its forces in Ukraine would maintain a 36-hour ceasefire declared by President Vladimir Putin until midnight, despite Ukraine rejecting the offer. In a Facebook post, the General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces said Russian troops had shelled dozens of positions and settlements along the front line on Saturday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attacks showed Moscow could not be trusted. Russia said its troops had only returned artillery fire when fired upon by Ukrainian forces. Reuters was not able to ascertain the origin of the shells heard in Bakhmut. A drive around Bakhmut, which sits on the front line bisecting Ukraine's Donetsk province, reveals the scars of months of bombardment, from smashed storefronts to mangled workshops and wrecked businesses. Volunteers like Lysin help to maintain invincibility centers, set up to provide electricity, heat, water, internet service, mobile phone connections and medicines free of charge as Russian attacks devastate basic civilian infrastructure. Ukraine's president praised the United States for including tank-killing armored vehicles in its latest multi-billion-dollar package of military aid, saying they are exactly what is needed for Ukrainian troops locked in combat against Russian forces, even as both sides celebrated Orthodox Christmas on Saturday. The White House announcement Friday of $3.75 billion in weapons and other aid for Ukraine and its European backers came as Moscow said its troops are observing a short Orthodox Christmas ceasefire. Ukrainian officials denounced the unilateral 36-hour pause as a ploy and said it appeared to have been ignored by some of Moscow's forces pressing ahead with the nearly 11-month invasion. Ukrainian officials reported Russian shelling attacks in the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions on Saturday. Russia's defense ministry insisted Saturday that its forces along the 1,100-kilometer, 684-mile, front line were observing the Kremlin-ordered truce, but returned fire when attacked. The latest package of U.S. military assistance was the biggest to date for Ukraine. For the first time, it included 50 Bradley armored vehicles and 500 of the anti-tank missiles they can fire. Germany also announced it would supply around 40 Marder armored personnel carriers and France promised wheeled AMX-10 RC tank destroyers. Together, this week's pledges were powerful signals that Ukraine can count on continued long-term Western aid against Russian President Vladimir Putin's drive to dismember the country. Celebrated by both Ukrainians and Russians, the Orthodox Christmas holiday also underscored the enmity that Russia's invasion is precipitating between them. In a revered cathedral in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, the Christmas service Saturday was delivered in the Ukrainian language, instead of Russian, for the first time in decades, highlighting how Ukraine is seeking to jettison Moscow's remaining influences over religious, cultural and economic life in the country. The monastery complex is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The cathedral was built about 1,000 years ago, then reconstructed in the 1990s after being ruined in World War II. The Putin-ordered Christmas ceasefire that started Friday was first proposed by the Russian Orthodox Church's Kremlin-aligned head, Patriarch Kirill. The Orthodox Church uses the Julian calendar and celebrates Christmas on January 7th. Putin's order said a ceasefire would allow worshippers in combat zones to attend Christmas services. The pause was due to end Saturday night, at midnight Moscow time, which is 11 p.m. in Kyiv. In the fiercely contested Luhansk region of eastern Ukraine, Regional Governor Serhiy Haidai reported continued Russian shelling and assaults. Posting Friday on Telegram, Haidai said that in the first 3 hours of the ceasefire, Russian forces shelled Ukrainian positions 14 times and stormed one settlement 3 times. The claim couldn't be independently verified. Ukrainian authorities on Saturday also reported attacks elsewhere in the previous 24 hours, although it wasn't clear whether the fighting was before or after the ceasefire's start. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine said Russian forces carried out a missile strike and 20 salvos with rockets, and targeted settlements in the east, northeast and south. In the southern Kherson region, Governor Yaroslav Yanushevich said Saturday that Russian forces shelled 39 times on Friday, hitting houses and apartment buildings, as well as a fire station. 1 person was killed and 7 others were wounded. Kremlin forces shelled Ukrainian positions in eastern Ukraine with mortars and artillery despite Russia's unilateral 36-hour truce set to run through Saturday, Ukraine's general staff said in an evening update. The brief ceasefire called by Russian President Vladimir Putin was to coincide with the Orthodox Christmas holiday. Russia said earlier its troops repelled Ukrainian offensives in the Donetsk region. The Biden administration unveiled its latest, $2.85 billion package of weapons for Ukraine, including powerful offensive equipment that was previously withheld. Republican Kevin McCarthy was elected U.S. House Speaker in a deal that could involve cuts to defense spending. The UK will host a meeting in March focused on alleged war crimes committed by Russian forces during their invasion of Ukraine, with justice ministers from around the world expected to attend. Russian forces attacked Ukrainian positions with tanks, mortars, and artillery despite the announced 36-hour truce set to run through Saturday, Ukraine's general staff said on Facebook. Russian troops conducted an airstrike and 7 salvos from multiple launch rocket systems Saturday, continuing attempts to push forward near Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Lyman in the Donetsk region and at Kupiansk in Kharkiv region. More than 70 locations were shelled while Ukrainian forces struck against near 30 locations used by Russian troops. Russian forces are violating their own ceasefire, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his nightly video address. He said Russian shells again hit Bakhmut, a city that has been embattled for months, and other Ukrainian positions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a decree Saturday imposing sanctions on 119 individuals, most of them Russian show business and film stars, as well as media personalities. The list includes renowned opera singer Anna Netrebko, Oscar-winning movie director Nikita Mikhalkov and pop singer Dmitry Dima Bilan, who has performed at the Eurovision Song Contest. The halt in hostilities, tied by Putin to Orthodox Christmas holiday, is scheduled to end at midnight Moscow time, or 10 p.m. Central European time. Russia's defense ministry said Saturday its troops were repelling Ukrainian offensives in the Donetsk region. Ukraine's ambassador to Berlin warned against delays in decisions on future military support, days after Germany's government announced it would supply Kyiv with Marder infantry fighting vehicles. Alexei Makeyev said he was optimistic that Leopard-type tanks might be offered next. The Iris-T air defense system and Gepard flak tanks previously provided by Germany were already showing a fantastic result in intercepting Russian missiles and drones, and the Marders will benefit our ground forces enormously, Makeyev told the German magazine Wirtschaftswoche. It's understandable that Germany wants to coordinate decisions with its partners, but it is crucial not to hesitate too long in supplying weapons. Every day costs us many lives, Makeyev said. Putin praised church organizations for supporting Russian soldiers taking part in what he called a special military operation, without mentioning Ukraine by name in a message for the Orthodox Christmas holiday. The Russian leader wished Orthodox Christians and other Russians who celebrate the holiday health, success, and all the best, in an address published on the Kremlin website. Putin attended a service at the Annunciation Cathedral in the Kremlin on Friday night. Ukraine's president congratulated Kevin McCarthy after his election as Speaker of the U.S. House, saying, "We're counting on your continued support." Justice ministers from around the world will meet in London to discuss how to best support investigations of war crimes arising out of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the UK Justice Ministry said. Co-hosting the March summit will be UK Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab and Dutch Justice Minister Dylan Jesselgaas-Zegerius. The goal is to increase support for the International Criminal Court and coordinate efforts to ensure it has all it needs to carry out investigations and prosecute those responsible, according to the statement. Ukraine's Prosecutor General's office said in December that it's investigating over 5,000 cases of alleged torture or bodily harm by Russian troops during their occupation of Ukraine. Cases of sexual violence, including against children, are also being investigated. The Biden administration announced a $2.85 billion package of military hardware to Ukraine, supplying powerful weapons it previously withheld. The package includes 50 Bradley fighting vehicles, as previously indicated, but also, for the first time, the Paladin self-propelled howitzer system. The weaponry additionally includes surface-to-air missiles, armored personnel carriers and ammunition. It marks a major step forward in what the U.S. has been willing to give Ukraine. Packing a cathedral for Orthodox Christmas, hundreds of worshippers heard the service in that church in the Ukrainian language for the first time in decades, a demonstration of independence from the Russian Orthodox Church. Richly decorated with golden icons and panels, the cathedral, part of the complex known as the Monastery of the Caves and a UNESCO World Heritage Site, put up a video screen outside for the overflow of worshippers, despite the frigid temperatures of -10°C, 14°F. The cathedral, built about 1,000 years ago then rebuilt in the 1990s after being ruined in World War II, had been under control of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which formerly had ties with the Russian Orthodox Church. In 2019, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine received recognition from the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. Moscow's and most other Orthodox patriarchs refused to accept that designation that formalized a split with the Russian Church. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church, UOC, which remained loyal to the Moscow Patriarch since the 17th century, declared independence from Moscow's Patriarchate after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The UOC gave Moscow a liturgical cold shoulder by dropping the commemoration of Moscow Patriarch Kirill as its leader in public worship and blessing its own sacramental oil rather than use Moscow's supply. Metropolitan Epiphanius, the primate of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, spoke not just about Christmas but delivered a political message about the war. Natalia Levshina said her husband couldn't come to the Christmas service as he is fighting on the front line, but she will send him photos of the service as it's very important to him. Originally from Donbass, she said she stopped attending the Church of the Moscow Patriarchate in 2014, when Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula and supported the conflict in the eastern part of Ukraine. Others in Ukraine have decided to distance themselves from the Russian Orthodox Church by celebrating Christmas on December 25. In 2019, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine received recognition from the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, but the Moscow's Patriarch refused to accept that. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church declared independence from Moscow's Patriarchate after Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24, ending the Ukrainian Church's loyalty to the Moscow Patriarch, which dated back to the 17th century. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church removed Moscow Patriarch Kirill as its leader in public worship and now uses its own sacramental oil for blessings rather than oils supplied by Moscow. Prominent Ukrainian Orthodox Church leaders have rejected the allegations of ties with Moscow, insisting that they have loyally supported Ukraine from the start of the war and that a government crackdown will only hand a propaganda coup to Russia. Washington on Friday committed the single largest defensive aid package to Ukraine yet after pledging $3 billion in additional security assistance as it looks to change the dynamic on the battlefield. The latest drawdown package includes an array of military vehicles for combat like 50 Bradley fighting vehicles, 100 armored personnel carriers, 55 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles and 138 high-mobility multipurpose wheeled vehicles. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly pleaded with Western allies to send his troops tanks as brutal ground warfare persists in Ukraine's eastern regions, particularly in Luhansk and Donetsk. Though the Bradley fighting vehicle is not technically classified as a tank, it is an armored vehicle propelled on tracks, equipped with a free-turning turret and has mounted firepower, and according to U.S. defense officials could be used to great effect in Ukraine. The main difference between the Bradley fighting vehicle and the US's M1 Abrams tank is its lighter armor and cannon ability. Cooper acknowledged that Ukraine still needs tanks but argued Kyiv needs to be able to maintain the costly equipment in order for it to be effectively used. Roughly a battalion's worth of troops, some 500 soldiers will be trained at a time over the course of a month. Another 18 howitzers and 18 ammunition support vehicles are also included in the latest package, which marks the 29th drawdown the U.S. has pulled from its stocks for Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of various forms of ammunition, artillery and mortars rounds were also approved, along with more air defenses systems, aircraft rockets, anti-armor rockets. Sniper rifles, machine guns, ammunition for grenade launchers and small arms will also make their way from the U.S. to Ukraine's front lines. The U.S. last month pledged to send a Patriot surface-to-air missile system to help Ukraine's air defenses, an announcement that came as Russia was continuously bombarding Ukrainian cities and energy infrastructure in aerial campaigns ahead of Christmas. France became the first nation to commit to sending Ukraine tanks earlier this month, and on Thursday Germany said it would send armored personnel carriers and one Patriot air defense missile battery system. One Patriot battery includes up to 8 launchers, each of which can hold 4 missiles, according to the Associated Press. The entire system reportedly requires roughly 90 soldiers to operation and maintain, as it includes a sophisticated radar and control station, along with computers and generators, though only 3 soldiers are actually needed to fire the system. Ukraine's president praised the U.S. on Friday for promising to supply it with tank-killing armored vehicles, as part of a new multi-billion-dollar package of military aid. Volodymyr Zelensky said they are exactly what is needed for Ukrainian troops as they battle Russia's invading force. On Friday, the White House announced its latest raft of military assistance for Kyiv, the biggest to date. The $2.85 billion package included Bradley armored vehicles, known as tank killers since they can fire anti-tank missiles for the first time. In 2022, the U.S. sent nearly $50 billion in assistance to Ukraine, including humanitarian, financial and military support, according to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, a German research institute. Orthodox Christians in Russia and Ukraine filled churches on Friday evening for Christmas Eve celebrations, with the conflict raging between the Orthodox neighbors. Patriarch Kirill, leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, the world's largest Orthodox denomination, led elaborate services at Moscow's Christ the Savior Cathedral, together with dozens of priests swinging smoking incense and chanting. A day earlier, Kirill called for a 36-hour ceasefire in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed, but Ukrainian officials dismissed it as an attempt to allow Moscow's forces to regroup. Of 260 million Orthodox Christians in the world, about 100 million are in Russia, while Ukraine has around 30 million believers. Justice ministers from around the world will gather in London to increase support for the International Criminal Court, ICC, as its investigations of alleged war crimes in Ukraine, the British government said on Saturday. The meeting in March, which will be hosted by UK Justice Secretary Dominic Raab and his Dutch counterpart Dylan Jesselgas-Sigerius, will be attended by ICC Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan, according to a statement. The meeting will seek to increase the global financial and practical support to the ICC and coordinate efforts to ensure it has all it needs to carry out investigations and prosecute those responsible, the statement said. Russia has denied targeting civilians and other war crimes. The UK has been steady in its backing for Ukraine, having provided £2.3 billion in military support to Kyiv. Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich transferred his children several secretive trusts worth billions before being slapped with sanctions, according to The Guardian. His 7 children became the owners of 10 offshore trusts, amounting to at least $4 billion in early February 2022, the UK newspaper reported. Abramovich, former owner of Chelsea FC, was sanctioned shortly after this sweeping reorganization of his finances, with experts saying the move made it harder to target the oligarch. They show that Abramovich's children, 5 of whom are adults, with the youngest aged 9, became billionaires almost overnight. Sanctions experts told the British newspaper that the move will make it harder for countries to sanction Abramovich. Once Israel's richest man, the 56-year-old is accused of having close ties with the Kremlin and Putin. He has been sanctioned by the UK, EU, and Canada, though not the US. However, the US Justice Department seized 2 of his aircraft last year, saying they had been used in violation of sanctions on Moscow over Ukraine. Russia's president praised the Russian Orthodox Church for supporting the Ukraine war in an Orthodox Christmas message seeking to rally people behind his vision of modern Russia. The Kremlin issued Putin's message after he attended an Orthodox Christmas Eve service on his own inside a Kremlin cathedral, instead of joining other worshippers in a public celebration. Putin praised the Orthodox Church, whose influential head Patriarch Kirill has fully backed the offensive in Ukraine. In his message, Putin said he viewed the Russian Orthodox Church as an important stabilizing force in society, amid a historical clash between Russia and the West over Ukraine. Many Orthodox Christians celebrate Christmas on January 7, but the Russian Orthodox Church's backing for Moscow's war in Ukraine has angered many Ukrainian Orthodox believers. Patriarch Kirill has called on believers to support pro-Russian brothers during Moscow's offensive in eastern Ukraine. The founder of Russia's Wagner Group said on January 7 that he wanted his forces and the regular Russian army to capture Ukraine's eastern city of Bakhmut for its resources and underground cities. The Wagner Group is Russia's most high-profile mercenary group and was founded by Yevgeny Prigozhin, Russian oligarch, Putin confidant, and former convict. Along with the Russian military, the group has taken part in the fierce battle for the eastern Ukrainian city Bakhmut, around 215 kilometers southeast of Kharkiv. Russia's 5-month-long effort to try and take Bakhmut has resulted in major casualties on both sides, but the city remains Ukraine's key fortress in the area. The cherry on the cake is the system of Soldar and Bakhmut mines, which is actually a network of underground cities. It not only has the ability to hold a big group of people at a depth of 80 to 100 meters, but tanks and infantry fighting vehicles can also move about, he said. Earlier on January 6, Reuters reported that the United States believes that Prigozhin has invested his troops in the fight for Bakhmut because of an interest in the salt and gypsum from mines near the city. On January 7, Russian propagandists claimed that Wagner had taken control of Soledar, a settlement just outside of Bakhmut, but Ukrainian forces later reported that it still controlled the town despite Russian assaults in the area. Soledar is the site of the Soledar salt mine. Its scale is vast and includes an underground concert hall. Dmytro Lubinets, Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Ombudsman, has criticized the UN for its conciliatory and neutral stance on the recently dissolved fact-finding mission into the Olenivka prison attack. We found out from the UN Secretary-General that he had decided to disband the mission. We have not heard a word at the press conference about the Russian Federation not granting the mission access to Olenivka. There was no analysis of Russia's actions. Ukraine has publicly said that it was ready to facilitate, to create appropriate conditions, as long as it comes. On January 5, Antonio Guterres dissolved the fact-finding mission into the Olenivka prison attack. On July 29, 2022, Kremlin-aligned media outlets reported the attack on a prison camp in Olenivka, Donetsk Oblast, where Ukrainian prisoners of war were being held. Russian propagandists said that at least 53 people were killed there. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine denied Russia's accusations that Ukraine organized and carried out the attack. The General Staff said that Russia carried out the attack in an attempt to cover up the fact that Ukrainian prisoners were being tortured and killed in Olenivka. In the beginning of September 2022, the UN said that Russia has failed to provide access to Ukrainian prisoners of war. In the beginning of October, the UN said that their mission could not access the territory of the prison camp in Olenivka because of the lack of security guarantees. Finnish Defense Minister Mikko Savola said on January 7 that Finland was preparing its 12th package of military aid for Ukraine, without disclosing its content for security reasons. Finland is ready to provide Ukraine with Leopard 2 battle tanks if Europe gives it the green light, Antti Häkkinen, chairman of the Defense Committee in Finland, said, Finnish news site MTV Uutiset reported earlier. Finland has already sent about €190 million worth of military aid since Russia launched its full-scale invasion on February 24, according to European Truth. The United States and Germany announced on January 5 that the U.S. would provide Ukraine with 50 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles worth $2.8 billion, while Germany approved a shipment of its Marder infantry fighting vehicles. On January 4, French President Emmanuel Macron announced the decision to supply Ukraine with light tanks and Bastion armored fighting vehicles. President Volodymyr Zelensky has revoked the Ukrainian citizenship of 13 clerics of the Russian-affiliated Ukrainian Church, according to sources cited by Livy Bear, a Ukrainian news site. The decree hasn't been published so far as it contains sensitive information, according to Livy Bear. Some of the clerics on the list have already fled to Russia, and some of them were suspected of collaboration with Russian forces and treason, Livy Bear reported. The priests who haven't fled may be expelled from Ukraine, according to the news site. Zelensky signed a decree on December 2 to approve a proposal by the National Security and Defense Council to ban the Russian-backed Ukrainian Church. The National Security and Defense Council instructed the cabinet on December 1 to draft a bill on such a ban. The bill is expected to be considered by the Verkhovna Rada, Ukraine's parliament. Since November, Ukraine has conducted nationwide raids on religious sites that belong to the Russian-controlled church, during which authorities say they have so far found Russian passports, anti-Ukrainian propaganda, and a stolen collection of icons. Searches have also taken place at the Moscow Patriarchate-controlled Kiev-Pechersk Lavra.